Hello everybody, welcome in. Today I'm gonna be putting some watercolor paint and probably some watercolor pencil media, maybe a little bit of Neocolor too, wax pastel, water-soluble crayons. I've got a handful of new ones, so we might be using a little bit of those. I'm gonna be preparing a watercolor background that we use for the Pebble drawings. When I'm prepping the backgrounds, I like to work wet and wet. So I just use a spray bottle, wet the back of the paper a little bit, and wet the front. These are just studies, so I'm not taping them down and doing anything terribly fancy with them. That'll do a pretty good job of it. This paper is a bit dry. It's really soaking up the water. So if your paper's curling up a bit, if you wet the back as well, that helps it lay flat, then you don't have to fight it the whole time. There we go. Hi there, welcome in. So I got a little bit of watercolor paint mixed up here on my palette, which is a right mess. You can tell. You can tell when an artist has been working. Things can get a little bit dirty looking. And I'm creating these little studies of rocks, so I'm not worried about stuff being muddy too much, because the tones that I want are more natural earth tones. I think I can use a bigger wash brush, I think. Step up to a number 12 round. So I made some forays into town this week, and I hit the art supply stores and spent a little cash, picked up a little bit of new paint, including some quinacridone gold, which is a Daniel Smith color, and it does some really interesting things. And when you drop it in, it just makes the pigment move away from it. So not quite sure why yet, haven't done a deep dive on that, but played around with it a little bit, and it was a little, it's always kind of thrilling when there's something unexpected that happens. So I'm just gonna let that beautiful golden yellow drive that olivey gold out away and make some different shapes and splotches in our background. How's everybody doing today? It's nice to see everybody out there. Hi. I'm using quite a lot of water. I want this paint nice and loose. Just wanted to make lovely splotches and wonderful shapes. So if you're an artist and you're fond of the quinacridone colors, I've been talking about this in a couple of my other live streams as well, but apparently the quinacridone is becoming increasingly difficult to source, so we're not going to be able to get single pigment quinacridone. The Daniel Smith one that I bought is using a couple of pigments, not just the quinacridone. So I guess the thing to take out of that is to love it and value it while it's here, because like most things, or like a lot of things in life, it's not here forever. So this is using a blend of pigments instead of being a single pigment paint. And if you are mixing your colors, finding a single pigment paint is helpful when you mix, because then your mixes aren't muddy. It helps them to stay clear. So this is using P048 and PY150. P is for pigment, O is for orange, and PY, pigment yellow 150. And I thought I'd try the Daniel Smith colors. People really seem to enjoy the way they work, so it's certainly a luminous color. So it's nice to get a little bit of luminosity into the work. I'm chuckling because I just looked up and realized I rinsed my brush in my drinking water. So that happens often enough. It's always just a matter of time. It's not the best practice to keep food or beverages in your work area, but I do it anyway. What are we gonna do with me? Probably not gonna train me to keep a cup of tea or a glass of water out of my work area, but I have been working on looking at something before I drink it, so even if it's the right glass, if the water's the wrong color, don't drink it. So, do as I say, not as I do. I think it's one of those situations. Oh, we've almost worked our way all the way through October already. I think we have less than a month till Thanksgiving. Can you believe that already? I mention it because that's the inspiration for the colors. I'm working with some lovely fall colors today. Alrighty. Get a little bit of paint mixed up over here. have a Perylene Maroon. See on the palette there? It's got a lovely wine. A rich red, but not too bright. I think that'll work well with our palette. Just gonna tap that in a bit. Bring in more water. We'll see when this dries down. I've been struggling to find a nice earthy red that'll dry down and not look like dried blood. For some reason, my paint box has just got an assortment of reds, and when I'm painting these splotches, I've come back through the next day and looked at things and thought, oh goodness, that looks like a crime scene, not a work of art. So, hey, Big Chief, hello, hello. I'm just going to try working in a little bit of cadmium orange, and that should take us out of that just kind of bloody red hue. That helps a bit. How's the world treating you, Big Chief? Things going well, I hope? Hello. Indigo's Insights. Nice to see you. Well, if I can get my big stupid brain to slow down for a minute, I'm doing okay. Then all thinky. Do you know how that goes? You just get ideas going and rolling around in your head, and can seem like peace is a little bit far off. Was it just how to... Dan K. Hello, stranger. How are you? How are the trees looking in Pennsylvania? They must be just putting on a show. The things started to turn out here in Oregon, and then they just sort of held. We had basically 2 weeks, most days, really nice weather. And we'd had a bit of a cold snap, which is what the trees like to... trees need to see that, and also the shortening of the days, right? And then the leaves will stop with the chlorophyll production, and they start to color up as the chlorophyll is taken in. The plant uses it for fuel. But we had a big stretch of sun, and everything just seemed to kind of go back to summer mode almost. So today, it's stormy enough to blow stuff off my porch, so... pattern matching. Depending on the ribbon, you may be able to rubber stamp an image on it, especially if you're using something like StazOn. So Dan, while you're here, I've got a drawing done on one of our pick 3. This was Gamboge, Rose Madder, or Permanent Pink, and I think Prussian Blue. And it's ready to get some shading put into it, but yeah, right? Thank you. Dan says that's wonderful. And it really enjoyed doing the pebbles, and it was so cheery to work with these nice bright colors. So I do have another blank ready to go. Let's see. Did a little bit of work on these guys. Added some shadows. Added a little bit more pink into the areas where there are no little rocks. And dropped in a new green. That is one of the Neo colors, one of these guys. And it's just jade green, but it's nice in there. Kind of minty. I don't know. I thought it turned out pretty nice. Yeah, the shadow work, that's really, that extra step just brings it up. So I've been going back and reworking some of the first ones I did, just a little bit of this and that to them. Okay. Alrighty, well, let's set this aside to dry, and I have another blank ready to go. And we'll just break out the pen and outline a pebble drawing, shall we? I went on a bit of a shopping spree at the art supply store and picked up quite a handful of these Neo colors. I have more on order. I bought everything I could find locally to fill in. That's something, when you know there's a range of colors out. I've talked to other artists about this too. We'll go, yeah, I know there's just like 6 more in this range, and I'm pretty close to having the entire set, so. I've been trying to buy some earth toned ones in this, and every time I go to the store they're sold out of it, so I finally just broke down and went online, and I did find brown, a lovely purple violet, I'd avoided black. Black is one of those things that goes, just a tiny touch of it goes so far. I much prefer to work with something like a Payne's gray or something along those lines. Light blue. Anyway, we will have to wait for the FedEx delivery person to bring the rest of those. Oh. I don't know. This company, Caran Dash, is a Swiss company. And they've been making these crayons, I believe, since I want to say 1931? A long time. Or I was looking at their colored pencils too, watercolor pencils. And those I know they've been making since the 1930s. So there are a couple of colors in the range. There's one called Cinnamon that I think is fairly new. But it's not really, they're not terribly fashionable. They're all fairly classic colors. So, yeah, it's not like this company is kind of an old school art supply company. So they don't really like have, like 1980s neon colors or what I call fashion colors. I'm sure that there's some term for it in the art supply world, but yeah, so nothing too spectacular in that way, but always things that you can use to mix pretty much any color you want to get to. Hey, Nance Drew. Hello. It's good to see you. You caught a live because I'm actually live streaming during daylight hours. That's probably the polite way to put it, as opposed to the middle of the damn night, which is when I am often kind of fighting insomnia. And I go, well, what can I do with myself? I'm going to do some art, so I'll turn the camera on, and then we're off to the races. So, gosh, it's so nice to see everybody in here, you guys. All right, I'm gonna let you, since there's a handful of you in chat. I'm gonna get to work on this, and you guys go ahead and just chat it up. If there's anything you want me to see, throw it up in all caps, and that'll help. It'll help me see it as it rolls by. And Dan, I saw your question. I'm still working on that. I did set up an email for the channel, and the company that I used had an app, which I downloaded, and it was pretty good. I was able to get my channel name and get it set up the way that I wanted. But my phone kept crashing. And it's just an Android. I mean, there's nothing fancy about it. The app should. So I went through a handful of things trying to diagnose it and get it squared away. And when I uninstalled that app, my phone went right back to behaving. So I'm just going to have to find a different email provider to do that with. It didn't, every time I opened a program or every time I tried to, read the news online or do anything, it just ground everything down to a halt. And I went in and set it so it didn't have a lot of permissions. It was clearly trying to get into all of my contacts, all of my web browsing, and I think it's good to remember that not everything, well, actually nothing really is free. And something that purports to be free is going to give you a service in exchange for something. And very often that something is access to your information. I would rather pay a nominal fee per month but I won't be using the paid version of that program just based on the way they designed an app that was going places where it wasn't allowed to go. More stories from the cranky old person. At any rate, which the rate with me is always slowly and deliberately, I will get that figured out, and we'll come up with an email address for that. I could have used you the other night, Indigo. Somebody came in here and just trolled me hard. I just went, oh, yeah, no thank you. I didn't even sort it out. I just went to full-on boot mode. They had been hanging out for a while, and there was nothing rolling in chat, and somebody came up and got real snarky because told me I should quit because nobody was chatting, and I thought, well, you just go do that on your own channel, sweetie. Gmail. Oh, it was, I don't know, a couple nights ago. It's no big deal. Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. Yeah, so Dan, can you get a second? I use Gmail for my plain old personal email. And I believe you can get a second one or more. And I thought about that a second, and I thought, with my luck, I would sign out of my personal email account and never be able to get back into it. So that I thought maybe it would be easier to use a different provider for the channel email. But I might just have to act like the standard old person and just write my password on a post-it note and stick it on the refrigerator. I don't know. I don't know when I became such an oldster, but it did used to be quite a... Okay. Alrighty, I have to read this because you guys give me some good info here. Oh, well, hanging out with your friends in real life is do that or watching streaming anytime, Indigo. No apologies needed. Okay, so you don't have to, you can just, so Dan's saying he can add another account with the app and it allows you to switch back and forth with a click. So you don't have to have separate passwords and stuff, or my phone can keep track of it? Oh, yeah, Nance, that's the one that crashed my phone. Yeah. Yeah. It was just poking into all of my stuff. All right, Yahoo. Is Hotmail still a thing? At least I'm not using AOL, you guys. Well, I'm used to how Gmail works. I don't love how it seems to dump things. It only... Stuff I keep, I like to keep it forever. And I had some stuff in the spam folder that I did want to keep a hold of because it was from somebody who was giving me a hard time, and I didn't really want it to disappear because they have given other people a hard time, and it'd be kind of nice to keep track of that stuff. But I checked the folder and it was empty, and Gmail announced quite proud of itself, "Oh, I empty everything after 30 days." It's like, and there's no way to set it. So, yeah. Yeah. You know those discs, they're kind of fun to set up with a spirograph and a Sharpie pen. I I found a stash of those AOL discs. So you just used to send them out to everybody. Every 6 weeks you'd get this useless CD in the mail with free access to AOL. And so I glued them printed side together so they're shiny side out, and did a spirograph design using a permanent marker and drilled a hole and turned them into sun catchers. And I'm sure AOL is just thrilled that that's isn't even a thing anymore. Yeah, my father was I think he was the last man in America sending money to AOL every month. I'm not kidding. It was probably the last 5 years we finally um, got him to set up a new email account, stop paying AOL $25 a month. Okay. Okay. All right. I can probably make a folder. Indigo. That looks like your suggestion looks like a good one. It also looks like one for a person who is using a computer. And yeah, he was paying the full load for AOL, and he just got panicked when we said that there was another way to do it. And his contact list was less than 100 people, so all he really needed to do was send out an email to his contacts and ask them to, send an email with the new address, and people understand how to do that. I mean, even I understand how to do that. So, anyway, Indigo, to finish. Um, I just use the phone. I just use a smartphone. So, and it was actually a little bit sad to go through Dad's contact list because he kept saying, "Oh, Bob passed away. Oh, John's not here with us anymore." Eh. It just didn't compute to him that he could have email that he didn't have to pay for. He'd just gotten so trained by AOL that the idea of Gmail just kind of fried his circuits a little bit. Ding. So, do any of you guys remember something called Live Journal? I think it was before MySpace. I used to hang out with people on a bulletin board for one of the very first people to live stream was a website called Jenny Cam. Oh, okay, you know DeviantArt, okay. That'll never take off. I'm laughing with you, Dan, because had that I had that perspective too, that this internet thing, no one's gonna have time for that. We have all of these things to do. Turns out the internet was a thing. Anyway, so there was this student. She was actually at a college in Pennsylvania, and she set up a live cam in her dorm room, and she was at Dickinson in Pennsylvania, and she started to live stream from her dorm room, just of herself sitting there doing her homework or all kinds of things, anything that she was up to. And you could tune in and just watch Jenny Cam. And then there was a bulletin board that was associated with it, and we would post on the bulletin board, and sometimes she would pop in and make comments or interact with us. And eventually she grew up and had a life and kind of took herself offline. And the community of people that were on those bulletin boards migrated over to LiveSpace. So it's really interesting to me how the online communities evolve and how they interact, and especially when you can get a group of people to virtually migrate from one place to another place. And of course, back then there weren't really all that many places to go. But quite a few of us evolved from watching Jenny Cam to watching that TV show Survivor. Every once in a while I'll run into somebody from the old crowd, and it's just like, 25 years. Right. Dan K says the number of things that I said wasn't going anywhere that turned into big business is astonishing. Had I invested in those things, I would be living a very different life for sure. Right? Just even if we'd bought shares of IBM or Disney or Coca-Cola, not to mention Apple. But LiveJournal was a thing for a while, and then what had happened was it was purchased by a Russian company. And I know a lot of people in my crowd were just concerned that our data was not going to be secure and that it was that having interactions with that website was just going to expose us to having our data stolen. Hello, annoyed cricket helmet. Ah. Yep, good old LiveJournal. And then not too long after LiveJournal, we had WordPress. This LiveJournal was formatted a lot like WordPress. And I kind of took a break from the internet. I was, working and running my business and didn't have a lot of time for that kind of stuff for quite a while. And so I think by the time I ran across MySpace, I saw that really as something for a younger crowd. But I like the parts of YouTube that feel like those old days with people that you get to interact across different channels and get to see a person's sense of humor and their personality. It feels like the good parts of the old days. Rachel, hello. Oh, Renster, oh my golly. I forgot about that one, Nance. So, annoyed cricket helmet, it's good to see you. How have you been? I might have to stream during daylight hours more often. It's nice to see all you guys. All you folks. Boy, am I the only one that doesn't enjoy being called a guy? Hey, guys. You never used to hear that phrase. I don't know when it popped up, maybe the 90s? You'd be at a restaurant table with yourself and your two gal friends, and they walk up and say, "Hey guys," and one out of the three of us would just go like this to the chest and go, "Not guys." Yeah, it's really entered the kind of current vocabulary, and I always try to not do it because I do find it rather annoying. Especially something like in a restaurant where you're dealing with a hostess or a wait person whose job is to greet people. I think it's just as easy to say, "Hey folks, welcome in. How's everybody doing?" You know? Can I get you started with a beverage? Dan says, I use folks as often as I can. Me too. I like that one. It seems like it's... Like, I can't think of any reason why folks would be offensive to any group of people or person. I have a handful of lesbian friends who just insist on saying, hey dudes, which I, like, it just doesn't compute for me, but they call each other dude, and I've, I've asked, and they're just like, because it's funny. Okay. I don't get it. I don't get it. Please stop calling me dude. No, it's a term of endearment. Oh, okay. No. Anyway, maybe it's just a phase and it'll go away. I hope it goes away. And I don't see it in people that are my age. Um, I was the oldest grandchild, so all of my cousins are younger than I am, and like by a gap of 15 years to the next one. Yeah. I'm not. I don't use y'all that much, but the one I like is all y'all. My traveling in from New Mexico into West Texas and going into a diner with a group of them and four people at the table, and the um, waitress asked if would y'all like cream with your coffee, and one of the people in the group said not all of us would, but some of us would, and the waitress just looked at him and blinked and never did bring him cream. So I think the moral of the story is, yeah, don't give somebody a hard time for saying y'all or all y'all. I think this drawing is going to need more shading than they usually do. I'm taking some pauses to visualize where the rocks should be. I think most of you have watched me do quite a few of these, and sometimes they go really quickly, and other times I am more deliberate with it. Just depends on the background. Dan says, all y'all is something I expect to hear when me and my friends are doing something wrong. No, not, it's like, I'm glad to see all y'all. I do enjoy the regional accents that we have here in the United States. I've spent time in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I spent one long summer in Kentucky, and boy, Kentucky. And especially on an army base, there's people from all over the place, so your ear gets exposed to all kinds of accents. And Oregon used to be one of the places that produced a lot of television news people because our accent is pretty neutral. But I think it's really changed, and I notice a dialect out here in Oregon that you didn't hear too much, say in the 1970s and 80s. But we've had a lot of people move from other parts of the country, and now some communities in Oregon, you'll hear an accent that almost sounds like a southern accent. And perhaps it's more of a rural accent than truly a southern accent, because it's not like we've got people moving here from Alabama and Florida and southern states. But there's a distinction between small town Oregon and the urban areas in the valley. There's really just, I want to say, like maybe 4 or 5 big cities in Oregon. So Nance, are you still in here? Oh, there you are. Yeah, is that I knew I heard a little something that wasn't exactly Chicago, but so are you planning a fireside or anything this evening? Nice. Nice. Okay. Is it okay with you if I make you a moderator? And I'd love it if you would drop a link to your channel and um, drop a link to that. Um, if you drop a link to that, the orchestral candlelit thing from Friday, I was kind of bummed out more people weren't tuning in for that, but there was, as usual, drama. So I enjoyed that an awful lot. Nance did a live stream on Friday night, and she's got it on replay. She went to an orchestra performance where the hall was lit with nothing but candles. So there were like hundreds of candles all over the place. And they did the soundtracks using a small, like a pretty small orchestra, though, right? And so it was the themes from not necessarily Halloween movies, but scary movies. It was actually, it wasn't, I thought, oh my gosh, that could be like a lot of jumpy violin, and it wasn't. You know, like I always think about the shower scene in Psycho. Like, I don't think I want to listen to that for an hour. But it wasn't like that at all. It was actually very beautiful, and it was a really cool thing. And so if you guys are just looking for something cool to listen to, it was pretty fun. So give that a view, because that was a really cool sort of a unusual kind of a thing that you probably don't have in your community necessarily. And if you just if you're there out there on the other end of the internet, I know quite a few people who like to come in here just find it relaxing. It's just something kind of low drama way to hang out. And I would also recommend Nance's playlist of her firesides. She lights a fire in this chimney or outdoor fireplace, and I'll tell you, those flames, just watching the flames flicker and the logs burn down and all of the beautiful colors, it's so relaxing and really enjoyable, and a nice thing to do to just to unwind and let go of the worry. And if you turn on the live chat replay, her chat is also pretty full of nice people, so that's pretty cool too. And Indigo, I know you probably could have handled that, but I know that Nance knew right where those episodes were, so. Yeah, that's good. Yes, please do that, Nance. I'm for anything that'll help people to have a little bit of peace. It, the world, especially the YouTube world, can get a bit chaotic, and I know this last week I've just been feeling the impact of things really heavily. And it's important to take time to enjoy something that's entertaining. It's not everything has to be heavy work, but I find myself slipping into watching stuff that's kind of impactful and important things, and it's kind of heavy, and then next thing I know, I'm rocking a major headache and not feeling well. So you'd think by now I would have learned how to work some breaks into it, but I think it's a struggle because of the nature of YouTube, the nature of electronic media, right? One more little Yeah, a little click, one more. This, that, the sounds that are built into it, the lure of the attractive thumbnails, the clickbait titles on the live streams and the videos. It's also just really important for our mental health to balance with something that feeds us a little bit instead of something that always just drains us. So, nice. I'm going to read that one out loud. Yeah, Indigo, put your channel up there. We are a small and micro channel supporting channel here, so. Dan K says he couldn't sleep the other night, so he found a fire channel on TV and watched that for several hours and just had a pup on his lap and silence to think about what I needed to think of. It was wonderful. Nice. I love that. Yeah. Out here in Oregon, at Mount Hood, we have Timberline Lodge, which, if you're a fan of movies like The Shining, Timberline Lodge was used for the exterior shots in the Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall movie, The Shining. Stanley Kubrick directed. And it's a national park lodge, and there's an immense fireplace that's with these big rocks, and I think they're still up there, but I know there used to be a couple of St. Bernard mountain rescue dogs up there. And around the holiday time, they would just run that on the local public broadcast station. They'd set up a camera pointed at the fire at the lodge, and every once in a while you'd see somebody walk in and they'd put a log on the fire, or you'd see one of the dogs kind of walk by or lay down in front of the fire. And it was one of my favorite parts of the holidays, just to sit and at family dinners sometimes if you could just get the games over with, or to a halftime and then switch the channel over. I would always go and switch the channel over from ads and sports to this beautiful view of the fire up at Timberline Lodge. So, yeah, do we have anybody else in here? Dan, do you have a channel, or do you ever do anything? Yeah, anybody who's hanging out there, just who would like a link drop, step forward and. I'm debating about this big area here. I kind of love it just open. I think I'll leave it that way. If I want to pencil in or outline any more pebbles, I can always come back and do that. Can't really undo it. Well, I splurged on some new watercolor pencils as well. This used to be such an accessible art supply. You used to be able to get into these for, I think I have some pencils that still say 75 cents a piece on the ends of them. $3.35 a piece for art supplies. Crazy. So I think I added a couple to my order from the online retailer. This time I went with Jerry's Artorama, and we'll see how they compare to Dick Blick. I liked the way the Dick Blick website worked, but I didn't like how they sent my order via the Pony Express. And it sat, according to the website, the tracker website, it said my order was in Wisconsin for like 9 days. And that doesn't make sense to me, so. It's possible that packages always, took that long and hung out in strange corners of the nation. The difference now is that with tracking software, we can see where stuff is. I mean, I assume it was in Wisconsin. It said it was. I guess it could have not been in Wisconsin, but it was just a tiny little package. It seems like it could have snuck it onto the airplane. So, I don't know. You guys know by now I have some cranky tendencies. So, the order I had with Jerry's Artorama also qualified for free shipping. And when I was looking at the shipping options, the free shipping, I had free shipping, or I could upgrade to something for $1.95, and the upgrade actually both of them gave an estimated arrival date, and the upgrade actually would arrive 4 days after the free shipping. So I thought that was how it should work. That seemed like it was logically how things ought to go in my brain. So now comes the part where we wait and see if they deliver on the sometimes you get the information and that's not what happens. So we'll find out. I used watercolor pencils as a kid. They're the sort of art supply that back when I was a kid, most everybody would end up with a set, at Christmas or birthday or beginning of school. And for a long time, I preferred a standard colored pencil. And if you're just using the media as a colored pencil, then a regular colored pencil does perform a little bit better. It puts down more color. So it's a little bit more satisfying to work with. Because as a young artist, I really didn't add water to the media And I didn't use much watercolor pencil on its own. Actually, I don't think I ever have, but I use it along with watercolor paint. And I've really come to enjoy using this media. And I think I will continue to keep exploring with it because it does some really cool things that you just, it gets into areas. You can sharpen those pencils to such a fine point, and it gets into these areas that you can't get into with other media. And it also blends in seamlessly with the watercolor. Once this dries, there's nothing that you can touch, and there's not much difference looking at it with the naked eye. It just really turns into a wash of watercolor. So for me, one of the downsides with watercolor paint is that it's a bit serendipitous. It does what it wants, and it's challenging to control. So those pencils, they add back in that element of control. That's how you guys can tell I'm not actually a watercolor artist. I think really to be a true watercolor artist, you have to surrender yourself to a little bit more than I do. So I'm just adding in enough water to blur those pencil lines. And I'll work in layers to build up the color density. Well, everybody got quiet. Did you all run off to watch the campfires? Hmm. Well, I don't mind too much as long as everybody's taking a nice mental health break and getting some relaxation. That is always my message here on this channel, is to encourage people to take time to get centered, get a little bit of balance. Find something. It might be painting pebbles. It might be watching somebody paint pebbles. It might be reading. Hanging out with a dog in your lap sounds like a really, really lovely choice. This is a dark indigo. I finally took some time this week and made swatches of my watercolor pencils. I have, 3 or 4 different companies, and of course to an artist, yellow is very different from the other yellow is different from the other yellow. So it's nice to have things swatched out on paper. Because the pencil itself might look the same, but this media is quite different. I noticed when I did the swatches that quite a few of them, when you just use them dry, they have one color, and if you get them wet, the color intensifies and it shifts, the hue shifts a little bit. So it's helpful to have swatches when you're doing work where you want a very specific color. It can, doing a swatch chart can give you a tool to help choose exactly the color you're looking for. So when I got that completed, it was pretty interesting to see where I had gaps, and I've been working a lot in landscapes and then the earthy tones that I've been using for the rocks. And I had a lot of bright colors that were maybe suitable for flowers, primary colors. But I didn't have a lot of colors that were what are called tertiary colors, shades and tones of yellows and browns and earthy greens. So I just took that along with me to the art store and was able to make some swatches, or sketches on right on the piece of paper. Anyway, it looks a little something like this. So the colors that I had were really kind of in the primaries. So I was able to fill in with some of these types of colors, a very yellowy green and a sort of a cool gray green. And I also discovered like all of the purples pretty much look like that same shade of purple. That'll be on my next trip. I will look for some particularly blue. I like the blue violets, and I just don't have much range there. And One thing about the colored pencils is you can't really mix them. They don't mix or blend very well. So if there may be some artists out there who are skilled at that. I'm not one of them. So I need my pencils to pretty much be the color that I need on the paper. So this blue looks pretty sedate here. As soon as the water hits it, it gets big and blue. I've got the brush pretty dry. So it creates a nice shadow. It's not as dark as a black or a dark gray would be. Got myself holding my breath a little bit here, so. And I don't know why. The worst that can happen is I get it wet and I just blot it off and try again. It's not the end of the world if it gets too dark. I have always struggled to get my shadows dark enough in my artwork. And it's funny, every artist has their own struggle. There are quite a few who can get the in the shadows and have a real hard time with the colors in the mid ranges. And I've always just rocked the mid ranges, and I can get the highlights in pretty well. I can have a good eye for where those should go. But I don't like covering up things. So if I get a lovely texture or something in the mid-range, I'm just loath to cover it up with a shadow. But you need shadows in order for the work to have a three-dimensional effect, to get depth into it. So I just keep pushing, keep trying. And it's not just my paintings and drawings. I struggle with that same issue in my quilt designs as well. And traditional quilt making relies on lights, darks, and mediums. So if left to my own devices, I would pick all fabrics in the medium colors. And fortunately, with the advent of modern quilt making, that is an accepted style. So about the time I really finally figured out how to add in those dark fabrics, they started to change the categories that quilt shows. So that's good. I need a golden brown in here, I think. So if you haven't worked with watercolor pencils, but you're familiar with standard colored pencils, in comparison, the watercolor pencils feel a little bit chalky. They don't lay down as smoothly as a regular colored pencil. Standard colored pencils, if you're working with something like Prismacolors, those are a wax-based pigment. I don't know if the mic is picking up. There's a little bit of a scratching sound as I'm laying these down. So standard coloring pencil it'll just feel a little bit more smooth as it's going onto the paper. And also the pigment lays down more smoothly. Let's see, I think I want to go green on that. But the magic happens when you add some water to this. This is one of my new acquisitions. It is a color called Earth Green, and it is in the Albrecht Dürer line. That's the artist grade of Faber-Castell pencils. The diameter of the pencil is a bit larger compared to your student grade pencil, and the lead is a bit larger. The texture feels a little bit more rich. And the differences are quite subtle. The color range on these, there's probably 60 or 72 colors in here, where your student grade is probably going to have a range of 48 colors. So the student grade isn't going to have the shades and tints of the colors. It's going to tend to have a range that is more primary colors. But the media will work very well. The student grade will blend in just fine with the artist's grade. So that's pretty nice when you're doing mixed media work. You do want your media to play well one with the other. Okay, I think I'm going to turn this around and then I'll go after those shadows. Those are nice. It dissolves almost immediately as soon as the water hits it. So I'm standing at the checkout going, oh, why did these have to cost over $3 a piece? You know, because that's what stuff costs. That's just the part of that's me being an old person, remembering back when you could when you could get artist grade pencils for 75 cents. And the other part is it's got a little bit different components than the student grade materials, so it is a pleasure to work with materials for the most part. But I will say that the differences aren't huge. They are pretty subtle. So if you're an artist on a budget, buy what you can afford. Look for things when they're on special purchases or on sale. Source them from something like Blick or Jerry's Artorama when you can. Both of those places offer really deep discounts. I bought every color that I could find in town from local art stores on these, and they were over $2.50 a piece in town. The colors that they didn't stock, I ordered online, and the online retailer had them for $2 a piece. So I did have to, you have to allow for shipping, and depending, when they're located in a state that has sales tax. And when I entered my shipping address, the sales tax dropped off. Thank goodness, or I would have contacted customer service. Most states, if they're shipping to an out-of-state customer, they don't collect a local sales tax. So you do have a couple of things you've got to factor into it, and your wait time. I've got to wait for those to be shipped. And what is that, at least? Yeah, about 25% savings there on those to buy them from the larger art supply place. But I do urge you to continue to support as much as you can. I mean, it would have been nice to be able to buy those for $2 a piece. Here I can't, because they can't afford to sell them for $2 a piece. But I do like having an art supply store in town. So I do make a point of trading with them so they can stay in business. Because the day that I live in a town that doesn't have an art supply store, I'm going to be a sad camper. Because that art supply store, that's where I can take classes or get a demonstration, or find things that maybe the big retailer doesn't have. So it does make a difference for you to spend your money, how you spend your money, and what you support. The town I live in did not always have a Walmart, and when Walmart came to town, many, many, many small businesses closed. Everything from rubber stamp. We had, oh my goodness, we must have had 6 rubber stamp stores here. And back in the day, I worked as a mystery shopper, which I don't know if most people even know what that is anymore, but I worked for a company that would get a contract to go into a business, and there would be a script. I might go into a bank and open a bank account. I might go to a cell phone provider and buy a phone, or go to, used to do a lot that were, well, once I'd do an oil change once, I'd take my car in to get the oil changed. And the company I worked for, I started getting these mystery shopper assignments to go into small businesses, which was unusual because most of the contracts we did were for chains. I'd go to a drive-through and order, the number 2 meal with a particular beverage. That it would often have me order something like a Dr. Pepper or a root beer, something that was the contract for the franchise said that they had to supply, but a lot of times the franchisees didn't want to supply. So it would be to test how well a business was selling a particular product. And Walmart came to town, and I started getting these different assignments, and it would be, flower shops, which was very unusual to be mystery shopped because they're almost always independently owned. Then I did a little digging, and then I found out that I was being hired by Walmart to go in and find out what the price of this was or that was. Or the rubber stamp stores to find out what lines of rubber stamps that the stores carried. And then you'd go into Walmart a month or 6 weeks later, and they'd be stocking that same line of stamps. And they would sell it below the cost of what the small store couldn't even buy it wholesale at the price that Walmart was selling it. And once the small stores closed, Walmart stopped carrying those lines, and only carried a limited line of stuff. And they had the power to hold their prices down below wholesale as long as it took to eliminate the competition in town. So once I figured it out, I stopped taking those assignments, but it didn't mean that Walmart stopped doing that in my community. It just meant that they hired another shopper to go do their dirty work. So in your communities, if you have businesses that you value, patronize them, support them. I set aside a little portion of my income every month to just, one of the things I like to spend my money on is supporting small business. So, when I was younger, that was maybe my go to the movies money, or buy a record album money, or something along those lines. And so it's just sort of, I guess you could say it was my entertainment budget, in a way. Alrighty, let's take a look at this other guy and see if we are dry. Yep. Ooh, that's nice. I think we can add in another color there. Clear the table off, make a little room for my palette here. think what this would benefit from maybe a little bit of a metallic. And we bought a new yellow. Let's throw that in there. Alrighty, so I haven't had any new messages since the subscription links went in. So I am wondering if the chat, I guess I'll check it on replay. But in case anybody's been asking me questions, I haven't seen chat in over 20 minutes, so. Not ignoring you. I just, I think we may have had a YouTube glitch there, so. That was raw umber. I wanted to try the new. I bought the exciting name for this one is brown. It almost just looks like chocolate, like a milk chocolate bar. It's kind of a nice warm brown. I'm just gonna scribble on some of this. This one's bronze. It's a bit metallic. There are 3 metallics in this line, as far as I know. Bronze, silver, and gold. So nothing too flashy here. But I do have a little tip for you. If you're looking to do a purpley metallic or a blue metallic, the trick is to use your silver and to mix that with a little bit of a color, because the silver is very neutral and it will add the metallic sheen to any color that you want to use. So you really don't need a lot of extra metallic colors there, because they are pretty easy to mix. And then I suppose you could mix any of the warmer colors with this. This is the gold, but it's a very green gold. All right, let's put a little color on this. And I'm working in color groups here. These will mix quite a bit with each other, so I try not to mix up too much complementary colors, because it really just turns into muddy gray-brown purpley color. That's, if that's what you're after, that's the way to get it. But I would like the greens to stay nice and crisp when I put those on, so I'll add those last. I see we've got people watching, so I want to thank you for spending some time watching. I really appreciate you. So, aren't these fun? They go on like a coloring crayon, but as soon as you add water, they dissolve. And they feel waxy. They don't feel dry and chalky at all. They feel like a wax crayon. And it's a water soluble wax. So we were talking earlier about the color range. And I want to say it's 70 or 80 colors in it. I ordered another 35, so it might be 90 colors. So there's quite a range. And I am going to challenge myself to start doing works of art where I'm sketching more with the Neocolor 2 now that I've invested a bit of money into it. But I also just really enjoy how you hold them in your hand and you're very much hands-on with it. And they're not quite as hands-on as an oil pastel where you would be blending it with your finger. These are blendable. They're much stiffer than an oil pastel that's meant to be put on in layers and blended in. But for years I've just used them to do like a little wash in a background on a rubber stamped card, or mostly as accents. And I don't know about you. I hope that you had the same joy as I had as a child. I loved coloring crayons. I could spend hours working with the good old box of Crayola crayons. And they're still in my toolbox today. I've got the big set with all of the colors. And sometimes, there's not something in the range, and I'll think, oh, there's a Crayola color that's the one in my mind's eye. So the metallic quality of the bronze and gold is fairly subtle. It's not like glitter. It's just a sort of a sheen or a glimmer when the light catches it. And it is possible to lay on more layers and build that up. All right. I think this is our basic yellow. How I didn't have just I had 3 other versions of pale yellow and Chinese green, and it may have been when I picked these up, because I built up my collection of these Neocolor 2s on road trips. I would take day trips around Oregon, and one of my favorite places to buy a souvenir would be an art supply store. And if they carried these, I'd pick up a couple of them, and that's how I built up my collection. So I don't think I've ever run across a Neocolor display that was fully stocked. There's always some of the little bins are empty, so I would buy what was available. And it just could be that yellow was just never available when I was out shopping. Or maybe the Chinese green just looked a little more appealing that day. You can't blame me. It's nice. It's almost chartreuse. I kind of like the way there's sort of a vibration to it when you're looking at it and your eye is trying to decipher, is it green, is it yellow? We've got emerald green here. It's beautiful, almost a turquoisey. I just want some little sparkles of green in it. This is a dark green. I hope you have maple trees where you live, because they're absolutely beautiful in the fall. And when you look at these fall leaves, they'll sometimes just have just a touch of green left on them. This is dark olive. It's very olive green. It reminds me of army uniforms. So I'm just going to work these from light to dark. So I want to keep that yellow and the Chinese green nice and bright. I'm keeping the brush fairly wet on this. Helps disperse the color, and we don't get too many of those harsh lines. Some lines, but nothing too harsh. So this is the emerald green. You see when the water hits it, it really looks like a gemstone emerald. It's quite vibrant. That's the trick with water-based media. It gives you a couple of versions. And the dark green it's a little bit warmer. It doesn't have that bright blue cast that the emerald does. So I like how they work together. Now we come in into that olive color. See, it's a little bit more subdued. I'm just using the olive to add some depth. I'm using that emerald and that yellow to add some color energy. Maybe a little too energetic there. Alrighty. There's always one spot. You think you get it, but there's always a corner. So the next step with this is to let it dry down, and I'll take a look at it and evaluate what it needs. I can tell you from here, I'm going to put a wash of something on that's just too brilliant with that emerald green. And I'm going to use maybe an orange to bring that red down a bit into more of a fall tone. But the hardest part of working with water media is the wait time. Now, some people like to use a blow dryer or a heat tool to dry. I like to just let it dry down kind of slowly because I've found that having the paper be wet for longer diffuses the pigment more. If you like it right where it's at, use a heat tool. It'll stop everything right in its tracks. It'll dry it right down. I kind of like the way things mellow and blend and bloom out. So I'm going to let this dry naturally, and we'll come back to it on our next stream. There's a little bit of a closer look for you. Here's our bigger pebble drawing with some of the shadows added into it. And I think we'll close out. We'll just do a little pebble drawing here. Let me pull this mat out so it's not quite so green on green for you. I think the camera does a little bit better when we've got the wood background too. I've used the Terra Verde watercolor, and it dries with this layer that comes up that's almost like an oxidation. It's quite lovely. I'm using a black Pigma Micron 03. These fine liners contain a pigment ink that dries waterproof. So I will be able to come in after I get the pebbles outlined and use more wet media to add shadows and highlights and even change the colors a little bit if that's what the drawing needs. And by using this waterproof media, that will let the outlines stay right where I put them. They won't bloom or bleed. And I can still add more layers of media. That's kind of an important thing to consider when you're working in mixed media. You can use alcohol-based media somewhat on top of a water-based media, but if there's enough liquid, it doesn't have to be water. If you're using a liquid alcohol, you can activate your water-based media. And that might be an effect you're deliberately trying to achieve. You might want to soften an area or get a color to bleed out and mix in with another layer that you have put on. But I think most artists will tell you at least one or two tales of woe of having a water-based piece and then having done something like set a glass of cold liquid on it or oversprayed something else, got a little splash of water, and all of a sudden you've got water spots that were not a calculated part of your artistic expression. So if you're working with something like acrylics, those dry. Once they're dry, they are permanent. You're not going to be able to reactivate them. Most oil-based media is going to take a solvent of some kind to activate. And you can if you work at it, but it's not as easy, certainly, as reactivating a water-based media. I like to work in all kinds of media, but one of the reasons I like water-based media is it does tend to be lower in toxicity, so it's pretty safe. Most of them are very safe to work with. Some cobalt and manganese notwithstanding. It's really easy to clean up. You know, I can just take these brushes and rinse them under running water and they're clean. The drawback is that you can't use a very wet glue. So if you're working on a mixed media project that has things glued onto it, the glue can reactivate the underlying layers, and then you've got color bleeding through or moving. Personally, I enjoy things that have a bit of a technical challenge, so it's not a downside to me, but as a beginning artist, or if you're working in a new media, there's a learning curve with how your materials will work with each other. And mixed media is a bit of a new, I'm not even sure if I could call it a discipline yet, but there's certainly, I mean, if you search mixed media on YouTube, you'll find over 1 million videos. It's something that's sort of a new thing that has grown out of the rubber stamping hobby. And a lot of people started with rubber stamping and discovered that they had some genuine artistic abilities that they maybe didn't have confidence in before they started rubber stamping. And as they began their creative journeys, they began to make art using a lot of media that were developed for the rubber stamp hobby. And there's some really incredible things in that field. It's not as rule-bound as our traditional fine art forms, and I love to see it. So in the 20th century, the Cubist movement made collage art into a fine expression. Previous to that, well, art galleries are really kind of a product of the 20th century. But there was a time where collage would not have been considered for sale in a fine art gallery. And now it's a respected discipline. And once collage kind of got unleashed, I think you could make the argument that mixed media art really is kind of the next steps of collage. Well, that one went quickly. Alrighty, folks. It's been fun spending time with you. I want to thank everybody who came in. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button, I really appreciate that. Please subscribe. This is pretty much what I do. If you had a good time today, we'll be doing this or variations thereof. Just working away on some project, one project or another. We might be taking a few steps on a bit of paper. We might be laying down the initial outlines or bringing in some shadows. So far, I've done quite a few of these pebble paintings. That is certain to evolve, particularly as new art materials come. So I want to thank everybody for being very kind to one another in chat. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you spending time with me. And I encourage you to make a little art. Do a little craft. Work with your hobby. just spend some time being mindful, doing something that gives you some pleasure and some joy. And I don't care if it's knitting or crocheting or cooking or hanging out with your cats and dogs or raccoons or whatever creatures you've got in your life. Um, but please take some time to do that. It's really good for you. It'll improve your quality of life. I'm going to wind up here. And thanks again to everybody. If you were on replay crew, thanks very much for spending time. And I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.